Turning back to the State of the Union now, one Republican congresswoman is being criticized for interrupting the president's speech. There you heard Congresswoman Lauren Boebert of Colorado referencing the 13 U.S. service members killed during the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. Her comments came as the president was beginning to speak about his son's death from cancer. So for more on this, we want to bring in Leslie Sanchez and Antjuan Seawright. Leslie is a CBS News political analyst and Republican strategist, and Antjuan is a CBS News political contributor and Democratic strategist. Thanks for joining us, guys. Leslie, I'm going to start with you. I don't know if I've ever heard of a president being heckled at a State of the Union address before. We know the president, but President Barack Obama was heckled, but it wasn't a State of the Union. He was addressing Congress. Yeah,
there was a you lie, but President Trump was heckled, and of course you had that incident where Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House of Representatives,
she ripped
up the paper, which a lot of people saw as being disrespectful to a president.
Okay, so I didn't think about that. I was thinking about the you lie, which was not a State of the Union address. Okay, so good point. What I'm asking you though, Leslie, is could we see Republicans, pass a resolution to formally reprimand Congresswoman Lauren Boebert about her behavior? What sort of reaction are Republicans giving?
I think American reaction is this is not Parliament, where they're used to that type of banter back and forth, and that's always what it harkens to. I think you and Vlad raised the important points. This is not unprecedented, whether it was 2009 with the, you lie comments against Barack Obama, but you can go back to George W. Bush and when he was talking about Social Security, and adjusting those. When Bill Clinton was talking about, health care, there were heckles and boos with respect to that. That is becoming part of the rancor and part of this polarization. And it was a very important moment in the speech. So you can't accept that kind of thing. You can't say this should be normalized. But the bigger issue was there was this very, big void when it came to talking about the issue she talked about, Afghanistan. We left a 20-year war, and there was not so much as a whisper about the effect that it had, that we left it in the Taliban's hands. You left maybe 100,000 people behind that were eligible for U.S. visas, and the 13 service members, men and women in uniform, who were killed. I don't know how you missed that point of the speech, but that shows you the passion that people have about these issues. Again, not condoning the behavior, but it speaks to the moment that we're in.
So, Leslie, before I jump to Antjuan, let me just ask you a little bit more about your take on the president's overall speech. I counted several times, at least more than 20 or 30 times, where there seemed to be bipartisan applause in the room, specifically when President Biden sort of veered rightward, if you will, from some of the issues that the left wing of his party has made a point of their politics, specifically talking about funding the police. I wonder, and I have a friend of mine who's a staunch conservative, and he wrote me last night and said everything that President Biden said yesterday, I have hours of video because he's contradicted everything he's ever said. And my thought was, well, President Biden isn't as polarizing a figure as perhaps President Trump or even President Obama was, because Joe Biden sat in that Senate chamber for 30 years and knows Mitch McConnell and knows Senator John Thune and others who are also perhaps staunch conservatives, but see him eye to eye. What did you think of that?
I love the political calculus in that, and I think that's a lot of what this was. So the progressive left has pulled the president and the legislation in a direction that is highly unfavorable, and the president has suffered the consequences of that with his dismal favorability. So think about the things he's talking about. Fund the police. That is a rallying political point that the Republicans are using in midterm elections. Border security. Hello, it looks like a talking point from the Republican, campaign playbook. And with respect to Ukraine, yes, there will be solidarity, and that's a national, global, I would say, message that the United States stands. While we may have bickering within the family, so to speak, we are very clear that we want a successful global approach to dealing with Putin, and Republicans and Democrats will support that. So I think you're right on. I think a lot of that is midterms are that target is in front of them, and they see the consequences of some of these low favorabilities.
So, guys, I just want to add one little thing before Anne-Marie jumps in, and maybe this is for you, Antjuan. Had President Trump said those things, President Trump got up there and said, fund the police, don't defund the police, border security, would the narrative today be President Trump is, spouting anti-immigration, perhaps even nationalist leanings? But the fact that President Biden says it, you saw some Democrats, specifically like Joe Manchin and others who are perhaps less left of center, applauding.
Well, I think it's more about intent and more about history. Look, I was so proud last night, not just as a Democrat, but I was proud as an American last night, because the speech and the posture we heard from Joe Biden was the reason Democrats voted for him in the primary and the reason so many Republicans were not afraid to split their ticket and vote for him in a general election in the last presidential cycle. It was a very unifying speech. He talked about national security and he talked about the issues at home. It was really a leveling and laying the groundwork for what is to come in this country. I was so proud when he talked about the economy, when he talked about where we came from and where we are now, when he talked about cancer, when he talked about border security, when he clarified his positions on issues that Republicans have used as a political weapon of mass destruction and distraction. I think that spoke very clearly to the posture we're going to take as Democrats going into the midterms. Conventional wisdom, Vlad, would say that the State of the Union address is one that is more of a political speech to the legislative body. I think the president did himself a tremendous service last night by making it a policy agenda speech so that Democrats can be clear and the American people can be clear about where we stand on the issues as we go into these consequential midterms, and to clarify where we are as a country and how far we've come.
So listen, I want to ask you, Leslie, Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds delivered the Republican response. I want to play a little of what she had to say.
The disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal did more than cost American lives. It betrayed our allies and emboldened our enemies. North Korea is testing missiles again at an alarming rate. The Speaker of the House recently warned our Olympic athletes not to speak out against China. And now Russia has launched an unprovoked, full-scale military invasion of Ukraine. President's approach to foreign policy has consistently been too little, too late.
So, Leslie, are we going to see more Republicans pushing this message? I don't think the public has forgotten, also that it was President Trump who, when President Zelensky asked for help, said, can you do me a favor on that phone call? Or, President Trump, who often praised in many ways China, not always, but has been critical as well. But, I'm wondering about this messaging that, the Democrats haven't had enough when, during the last president has come under pretty much the same criticism.
Anne-Marie, you raise a really important point. There are distinct differences in the Republican Party right now with respect to that. You have the traditional hawks kind of following in the footsteps of the late John McCain, who have been talking and beating a drum about the evil nemesis of Vladimir Putin for years, and that there is not a long-term winning strategy for victory with respect to this aggression. That, is it appeasement, which did not work? Is it underestimating, does not work? Is it setting a reset button like the Hillary Clinton approach, does not work? So what does that look like? And that void is creating opportunities for other Republicans to step forward. You're even hearing Nikki Haley with some very strong language, which is a distinct difference from Trump. So increasingly on that point, I will be probably the lone one saying this, but that Trump is irrelevant on that point because it's not seen as something that is measured with the moment. And as that divide continues within the party, the conversations are who will step up with the type of leadership they feel is effective and a direct contrast from Biden. And that's where the party's headed.
So, Antjuan, the president did talk about his Build Back Better agenda. And what was interesting to see was, of course, Senator Joe Manchin, who was a key holdout, was sitting with Republicans. Now, I'm told that he did that to sort of show that there can be bipartisan negotiations, bipartisanship when it comes to some of the issues that Republicans and Democrats agree on. But do you think that the president will eventually be able to get this legislation done?
Well, I don't want to use words. I don't want to play word gymnastics with how we frame the legislation with a title. I think it's more about the meat and potatoes in the bill and the things the president laid into last night, whether it was the price of insulin, whether it was about lowering costs, whether it was about dealing with inflation. I think the elements or the components of Build Back Better speak directly to those things. I said to a reporter late last night, this speech was about leveling and lowering the cost of goods and services in this country, but also leveling the playing field for everyday Americans. And I don't think you will find a Democrat or Republican, Manchin included, Sinema included, who can disagree with the policy agenda the president laid out. And that's why you saw so many moments in the speech last night where Democrats and Republicans stood to their feet and clapped their hands around the language that was coming from this president. It was middle-class Joe. It was retail Joe. It was the Joe Biden that most people, Democrats and Republicans, think that can unify this country. That's why they voted for him. And I think last night was a hard reset for him and a true pivot back to who he was as a candidate. And I think that's how he will govern going forward.
All right, we'll see. Leslie and Antjuan, always. When are you guys coming to visit us in the studio? It's been, I don't think you've been here yet. I know. We're getting close to the midterms.
I'll leave on the. I'll leave on the midnight train to New York as soon as I can.
Love it, love it. Republican strategist Leslie Sanchez, Antjuan Seawright, Democratic strategist, both CBS News contributors. We appreciate it. Thank you very much.